Welcome to Lesson 24 in Through the New Testament in Ancient Greek for Absolute Beginners. My name is Helena Stay, and I'm your guide as we read through the New Testament in its original beautiful language, the language of ancient Greece, which coincidentally was called Helena Stay. Because each lesson builds on previous lessons, be sure to start with Lesson 1. And please don't forget to like this video and to subscribe to my channel if you feel so led. In this lesson, we're going to read through the last part of Matthew 10, which is verses 16 through 31, and we're going to be talking about fearing God alone and confessing Christ. And we're going to make this lesson a large amount of review. We're going to review the articles we've learned so far, the prepositions we've learned so far, plus some new ones, adverbs, plus some new ones, pronouns, which we already covered all of them already, and conjunctions. And we're also going to be discussing verbs throughout this, just introducing you verb forms and also just pointing out future and some participles and some uses of the subjunctive. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so before we start reading the verses, I want just to introduce the verbs that you will find in them. So there are a lot of verbs in the first few verses we read. So let me just go through these and read them first. The first one is phobeomai, which means I am afraid, I am fearing, I dread. Then we have dunamai, that means I am able or I have the power. And then we have diafero, which means I carry through, I carry about, I differ, I make a difference, or I surpass. And in these verses, it will mean you are worth, you are more valuable. And then we have arithmeo, which was what we get the word arithmetic from. Arithmeo, it means to number or to count, or I number in this form, I number, I count. And then kalypto means to cover something up. And then we have eimi, which means I am. Lego, which means I say. Apalumi, which means I destroy, I utterly destroy, or I lose sometimes. We'll see it used as I lose later in this chapter. And then we have apocalypto. So you can see it's just adding the apa to calypto. So we have to uncover, to reveal. So calypto is to cover and apocalypto is to uncover. And that's where we get the word apocalypse. And then apoktano. Apoktano means I kill, I put to death. It also can mean I abolish, like you're killing a law, I abolish a law. And then we have akuo, which means I hear, I listen. That's where we get the word acoustics. And then poleo, I exchange, I barter, I sell, poleo. And then ginosko is I know, I come to know, I recognize, I perceive, ginosko. And then pipto means I fall, pipto. And then last we have epo. Epo is similar to I say, but it's more of an I answer, I bid, I bring word, I command, epo. All right, let's go ahead and read. So this is Matthew chapter 10, verses 26 through 31. Meun phobethete autus, udengar estin kekalumenon ha uk apokaluf thesetai, kai kruptan ha u gnothesetai, ha lego humin ente skatia, e pate entophoti, kai ha es taus akuete, Keruxate epi ton domaton, kai me phobesthe apa ton apoktenanton tasoma, tende psukein me dunamenon apoktenai. Phobesthe de malan ton dunamenon, kai psukein kai soma apalesai, en geene, uhi dua struthia asariu poletai, kai hen exauton u pesetai Epi tengain. Anu tu patras humon. Humonde kai haitrikes tes kepheles pasai erithmemenai esin. E un phobeste palon struthion diaferete humes. All right, so again, I wanted to show you these verbs that we just read. Phobeomai, in this case, there were a lot of forms of phobeomai. Let me just go back and show you. Here we have you should fear. It's a subjunctive passive. And notice phobeomai is a middle only, which is why it's going to be passive. You shouldn't fear because it's modified with may, of course. May with non-indicative verbs means not. And then we also have phobeste, you should be afraid. And then we also have phobeste again down here. But we also see dunamai, the one that is able. So dunamai is not being able. Here is a participle. So dunamenon, not being able to kill. You should fear, however, the one who is able, dunamenon, both soul and body. All right, and then we have arithmeo, which is here, that the numbers of the hairs on your head are known, are numbered by God. And then we have diafero. In this case, it's actually used that you are worth. You are more than Mary Sparrow. You are different than a lot of sparrows. You are worth more. And then kalupto and apocalypto we use up here. Concealed. So nothing is concealed which will not be revealed, or hidden which will not be made known. Here you can see that this is the passive form of to know. So to be known, see, that's in its future. So the sign of the future is the sigma here, the sigma after the. So gnosko, when the passive you have the theta, eta, and then the sigma will also be added for the future. So I'm just point those out when I see the futures. And then I am, we saw that with estin kekalumenon. That's third person singular. And then lego is very commonly seen. So what I tell you, I tell lego. And to destroy, we see here, apalesai, to destroy. This is the infinitive, usually ends with ein or I. Here we have it. And then here we have all the infinitive to kill, apakteno, which is one we also saw here. And then we saw, and then akuo. Let's check out where we see akuo. You hear in your ear. So what is spoken, what he tells you in the darkness, you should speak in the light. And what you hear in your ear, you should proclaim. So if somebody whispers in your ear, that's something you will be proclaiming on the housetops. So what used to be secret will become made known. Jesus came to make a lot of good news known that previously was kind of a mystery. And then poleo. So aren't two sparrows sold? Poletai. In this case, it's passive, right? Because it's the sparrows are sold. Poletai. That's why we have present, indicative, middle, passive, third person singular. And interestingly, even though it's two sparrows, it still uses singular. Sometimes when you have plural nouns, you will have a singular, as long as they're neuter. Plural neuter nouns is considered a singular verb. And then pipto and epo. So pipto is down here. So not one of them will fall to the ground apart from God's will. So will fall, pesetai. And now that's in an irregular form. You don't see pipto here. It changes. And then the sigma is an indication that it is future. So we'll learn more about the future in the future. But just notice that there's a sigma generally. Epo is up here, apate. Now, in the past tense, when we talk about I told you, it will have a very similar form to apo. It will actually say apon, will be I told you. But apate is speak. That's a command. It's an aorist imperative active, apate, in the light. Speak in the light. All right, let's go ahead and review before we go on to look at the prepositions in these verses. Let's review our most common prepositions. and whether they take the genitive, the dative, or the accusative afterwards. So first we have apa, which means from, and that's only with the genitive after it. Dia could either be through if it's followed by a genitive, or because of, which is the accusative. And then we have ace, which is only with the accusative, like ace in a hole, ace is how I think of it. So a for accusative. Unto, into, to, or in. Ek is always with genitive, out of, from. And genitive, that should make sense to you, because genitive is usually when you're of something or part of something or from something. And then n is always with the dative. And I always think of that as like if you're on a date, or if you're in a relationship, you are dating. So that's in, on, among, by, means of. And then a p is one of those confusing ones with it has three different meanings depending on what it's followed by, what case. So on or upon is with the genitive, and then upon or on the basis of is with the dative, and then against or upon is with the accusative. So upon actually can be used with any of the cases after it. So kata, down from or against with a genitive, and according to, like the gospel according to Mark would be kata, and then with the accusative, markon. So meta is with in the genitive and after with the accusative. And then para means from or with when followed by the genitive, with or beside when followed by the dative, and beside when followed by the accusative. So you can see there's kind of an overlap of meanings depending on the case. So that one is similar to a P. It has all three different meanings, three different cases. And then we have peri, which is concerning or about, and that makes sense. We have like perimeter, something about. And in accusative, usually accusative is something that's more like actual directional. So if you are talking about going around the city, then you would use the accusative, peri, and then the word for city, so we'll do Pauline. All right, pros is just like with ace with accusative. Pros and ace are only with the accusative, to, toward, or in the presence of. And then soon is just with the dative. So that's similar to n, soon, with or along with. And then huper is on behalf of or for the sake of with the genitive, and it means above. It's kind of a directional when it's in the accusative. And then hupa is by when it's in the genitive, and under or directional when it's in the accusative. All right, so that's a quick review. We're going to actually see a few other prepositions besides these today. All right, so here are all our prepositions in these verses. We have in the darkness, en te Scotia, which I think is where Scotland comes from. We've heard that earlier in Matthew. This is dative because it's after n, right? Always after n you have the dative. And then to foti. Remember fos? Fos is a third declension noun, so it's a little bit different. It's neuter, and in this case, foti is dative, so after the n again. And then ace. Ace is always followed by the accusative, and here it is consistent with what we've learned. Ta, us, akuete. So ta us, in the ear. So in ancient Greek, you wouldn't say in your ear. You can just say in the ear, because it's understood that it would be your ear. And then notice that us is another third declension noun. So I'll go over more detail about us in the future. And then we have a p, which is upon, and then it's genitive, upon the housetops, tone, doma tone. Doma is kind of like dome, so that's like the housetops. And then apa here means of, being afraid of. Interesting, it's just like in English, we have a word to be afraid, and then we have of, those killing the body. Tone, apoktenon tone. So that's a present participle, those who are killing the body. Ta soma, by the way, soma is body. But are not able to kill the soul. Psuke, psukein is the accusative of to kill. And then let's look at en, geene, so in hell. And this is actually a valley that's southwest of Jerusalem where I think they threw the trash. So it's not a place you wanted to go. And so it was kind of a figurative use of where you would go if you did not trust in the Lord. All right, and then we have a little confusing one here, and you might think this is in or on, but this is one, and notice the rough breathing mark. It's hen. One out of them. Hen, X. So here we have ek, but before it becomes X. X. And then a P. Again, we have a P upon. So here it's upon the housetops. Here it's to the ground. So you could see this is different because it's more of a falling to the ground, onto the ground. I believe we might think of it as onto instead of just to or towards. So a P, tain, gain. So here when it means onto, it has an accusative sense. And here's a new preposition we haven't seen. This is actually only 3 times in the New Testament. Anu, apart from or without. Anu to patros, humon, followed by the genitive, apart from. So because it's kind of the equivalent of apart from, it takes the genitive after it. All right, let's move on to another part of speech. Here we have our articles, and we learned these a long time ago, but let me go ahead and read them, and then they'll make more sense as we go through these individually, quickly. So I'm going to go across here, starting with singular nominative, and then masculine, feminine, neuter. Ha, he, ta. Tu, taste, tu. To, te, to. Ton, tain, ta. Hoi, hi, ta. Tone, tone, tone. Tois, tais, tois. Tus, tas, ta. And just notice how the genitives, singular, masculine, neuter, and dative, masculine and neuter, as well as genitive plural, masculine, neuter, and feminine, and then dative, masculine, and neuter, plural, are all the same. So you can see those patterns. And then also that your neuter is always the same in nominative singular and accusative singular, and nominative plural and accusative plural. All right, so we have the darkness, so te scatia, that's our dative. In the light, en to foti, we have foti is neuter, so we have to. And then taus is neuter, accusative. And then we have tone, tone, and then I think there's another, nope, those are only 2 tones. On the housetops, so we have tone for housetops is actually neuter plural, and then of those killing, so those killing are people, so it's going to be masculine, which covers both male and female, so that would be tone here. Of those, you should be afraid of those who kill the body. Body is neuter, so it's ta in the accusative, and then however the soul they are not able to kill, so this is also accusative. Tain, because psukein is feminine. And then you should be afraid rather of the one who is able to kill destroy both your body and soul. So the one, this is actually referring to God, so it's capital O here, and it's masculine accusative, so masculine accusative is here, ton. And then to the ground, it will fall to the ground, tain, gain. So here we have feminine accusative, upon the ground, or onto the ground. And the hairs is, a hair is feminine, triches. So high is our feminine nominative plural. And then of the head, tes kephales. So kephales is feminine, so we have of the head, we have tes. All right, let's move on. Now let's look at the adverbs. These are words that describe verbs. So I have them colored in violet. So may. So because you should not fear them, this is what's called a prohibitory subjunctive. Is like an imperative. You can use the subjunctive when it's negative. So may phobe thete. Notice the theta here because it's passive, because it comes from phobeomai, a middle only verb. So may phobe thete autus. Now it's may and not u because this is not an indicative mood. It's subjunctive mood, which generally takes may. There are very few exceptions. Sometimes you'll see u before subjunctive, but generally you only see u or uk or ook, like this omicron upsilon, and then the chi. That would be before a rough breathing mark. But here we have a K because it's for a smooth breathing mark. Ook will be revealed. Okay, here we have the indicative mood, future. Let's see where we see the sigma. Notice it's right here. This sigma is our sign of the future. We'll get into much more detail later. But the theta and then the eta after that is a sign of passive. Will be revealed. So that's from apocalypto. Apocalypthesetai. Now notice this phi is changed before the theta. And that's another little thing that kind of sometimes changes when you have apocalypto with the pi and the tau. It changes to the phi in front of the theta. And then u again before will be known. Remember gnosko? Gnosthesetai. So here you lose the kappa entirely. Gnosko becomes gnothesetai. And again, theta is for the passive and the sigma here is for the future. And then let's look down here, me phobeste, do not be afraid. Again, here it's imperative. So sometimes you can use the me with the subjunctive, and you can also interchangeably express the same prohibitory imperative idea with the imperative itself. Phobeste is do not be afraid, and this is an imperative, so that's why it takes may. It's not an indicative mood, it's the imperative mood, so it takes may. Not be able to kill. So this here is a participle, right? It's a present participle that's middle and passive because it comes from dunamai, which is a middle only verb, and it's do be afraid of the one that's able to kill, not able to kill the soul. So here this is genitive because to be afraid of, you want to be afraid of the one that's not able. You don't have to be afraid of the one that kills your body but can't kill your soul. So that's why this is genitive, because it's the same idea, to not be afraid of the one that's able to kill your body but not able to kill your soul. All right, and then of course may with participle. You only use u with indicative. Sometimes it's used with non-indicative, but very rarely. And then rather fear the one who is able. Now here it's interesting that you're fearing the one who is able. So here it's actually accusative. So that's an interesting switch. But sometimes phobeste can be used directly with accusative. So being afraid of, as opposed to fearing. So uki, this is not an adverb necessarily, it's a particle. So interrogative particle. It's like, are not even one? Not one. I put it down here, not at all. Are not 2 sparrows sold for one asarion? This is like 1 cent, basically. All right, and then here's our hen again. And then not one of them will fall. Pesetai. So we have the sigma to indicate future. U pesetai. Epitane gain. All right, and then last here, ne. Not therefore. So therefore, do not fear. Do not fear. Aren't you worth more than many sparrows? All right, conjunctions are little words that join ideas. So therefore is an idea. Usually it's something like as a result of or because of this. Therefore, un. Therefore, do not fear them. All right. For is kind of another kind of going on to explain why. For nothing is concealed which will not be revealed. And, or excuse me, in this case they've translated it as or. Kai usually means and. We'll see it a few other times. I won't really point out that too much when it's repeated, but here or is kind of makes more sense in English. Nothing is concealed which will not be revealed, and nothing will be hidden that won't be made known. So or is probably makes more sense in this situation. You could still say and. So and is here, and then sometimes you'll see de, it's post-positive, it comes after the first word in a clause. So de can mean and, it can mean however, it can mean but, and the translator just has to figure out based on the context. So here, you should not be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill your soul. So it's contrasting. They can do this, but they can't do that. And then here de is translated also as however. You should, however, fear the one who can kill or destroy both the body and the soul, right? So that de really depends on the context. Now here when you have two kais, kai psukein, kai soma, it means both and, both the soul and the body. All right, and then down here we have kai again, introducing, and notice how kai can go right at the beginning of a sentence as opposed to the de, which is after the first word. Humon de, so now this translator uses the word now. So now, even the hairs of your heads are numbered. So in other words, not in the past, not in the future, but right now, your hairs on your head are numbered. God knows how to count them all. He cares about you that much. He knows every little detail about you. All right, so therefore, meun phobeste. Therefore, you should not fear. You are worth more than many sparrows. And notice here, when you are worth more than something, the thing you're worth more than is in the genitive. So that's kind of a comparative use of the genitive. All right, let's take a look at all of our articles and pronouns. I used this little mnemonic device, ARPFID. Don't know if that helps you, but we have the article, ha, he, ta. Then we have the relative pronoun, hos or hostis, he and hatis, and ha. And then we have personal pronouns like ego, su, autos, aute, auta. And I'm only giving the singular forms here. And then we have reflexive pronouns like to oneself, emautu, seautu, heautu, heautes, heautu. And this should be actually a rough breathing mark, hemautu. And then indefinite pronouns, tis or ti, if it's he, who, or what. And if it's a question, who or what, that you would use tis, ti with an accent. And then your demonstrative pronouns, so to indicate something that's nearby, like this or these. Hutas, haute, tuta, or toot before a vowel. And then our far demonstratives are like that or those, ekenas, ekene, ekena. All right, so let's take a look at our personal pronouns in more detail before we move on to our verses. So these are all of the personal pronouns. On the previous slide, I only gave you this first row. These are the nominative singular, ego, su, autos, aute, auta. And then the genitive is emu or mu, su, autu, autes, autu. Emoi or moi, soy or so, auto, aute, auto. And then eme, me, se, auton, autain, auta. And then hemes, humes, autoi, autai, auta. Hemon, humon, auton, auton, auton. Hemin, humin, autois, autais, autois. Hemas, humas, autus, autas, auta. All right, so good review there. Let's look at our pronouns in these verses. So you should fear them. So here, to fear them is different than talking about being afraid of. So that's why this is accusative. That which. So here we use ha. Interesting. So it's kind of like the article, but it also works as a relative pronoun. That which will be revealed, or hidden, which, ha. And then what, I tell you, is just ha. It's accusative, neuter, singular. So just to look right here, we have ha for accusative, neuter, singular. All right, and then I tell to you, humin, to you. And then what you hear in your ear, ha es taus akuete. And then further down here we said, and one of them, hen ex auton, genitive, neuter, third person plural. And then humon is also of you, your father, you plural. And then humon again, even the hairs of your head, all of the hairs of your head are numbered. And then therefore do not fear. So let's look at that again. Humes is the nominative, second person plural of you. So you all. You all are worth more than the sparrows, many sparrows. So in the next verses, I want you to look out for two verbs, only two, which is very much simpler. So hama lageo, hama lageo. So this is like confessing, basically to speak the same, to agree, I confess. So to confess Jesus as your Savior, it would be using this word, hama lageo. And hama is the same, so I speak the same. And then arneomai is the opposite. That is to deny, to disagree, to deny or repudiate a person or belief. Arneomai and homologeo. Notice arneomai is a middle-only verb. So you have the omai at the end. Whereas here we have this is a contract verb, and I'll talk more about contract verbs in the future, but it has this epsilon before the omega. So you have a few different changes in your forms, which will come from contract verbs. All right, let's go ahead and read this. Only two verses here, Matthew 10, verses 32 and 33. Pas un hostis homologese in emoi, emprosthen ton anthropon, homologeso kago en auto emprosthen tu patros mu. Tu entois uranois. Hostis dan arnesetai me emprosthen ton anthropon, arnesomai kago auton emprosthen tu patros mu, tu entois uranois. All right, so let's look at those verbs again, homologeo and arneomai. So homologeo, notice here, homologese. So we have the future, we have a sigma, and then we also have this eta. So that's one of the forms you'll see with these contract verbs. And then homologeso, I will confess. I also will confess. Him. And then notice here, you confess in him. In English, we would just say, I confess him. So in auto, before the Father of me. All right, and then arnesetai, me, deny me, I will deny, arnesomai. So notice the sigmas is to indicate future. In this case, it's a subjunctive. Here is our future middle, because it's a middle-only verb. Kago auton emprosthen. All right, let's look at some prepositions, adverbs. Actually, we have no adverbs, but I'll put that in my title anyway. There's no adverbs in these two verses. Articles, conjunctions, and pronouns. So we have un here for therefore. Remember, un is either so or therefore or since or because of, etc. So everyone, pas, we'll talk about pas upon a little later, but therefore anyone who, hostis, confesses me. So en emoi. We have preposition en followed by the dative, as we would expect, and it can be either moi or emoi. And I think it just sounds better, emoi, after your consonant, en emoi. It flows more. Emprosthen is a new preposition, so before, emprosthen. And then we have tone, before men. So in English, we don't use the article, but in Greek, you would want to clarify before men, as opposed to God. So anyone who will confess in me before men, in other words, before other men who might actually not like that you will confess Jesus as your Savior. All right, I also, kago. I also, it's kai and ego, kago. Homologeso, I will confess also in that person, the one who confesses in me, before my Father, which is awesome. And then tu entois uranois is just more description of the Father. So the one who, notice it's just the article, but because you want to clarify that it's this same Father, it's kind of like a glue that sticks that together. Tu patros mu, tu entois uranois. It's kind of a way of just sticking it on there to give more description to my Father. So hostis dan. Now again, this dan, hostis dan, is a very common expression, like whoever now, hostis dan. So this particle is usually used for like conditional statements, like something might not actually happen. But whoever might do this, hostis dan, arne setai, will deny me before men, Jesus will also deny him before the Father. I will also, so kago, notice how it's arnesomai, kago. I also will deny him before my Father in the heavens. All right, one last thing. Let's talk about pas upon. So we have everyone here, pas. Now, if it was feminine, we would have pasa. Now, this is actually singular. It's kind of more accurately translated every person, right? Every person who confesses me. So pas upon are our nominative singular forms, and then pantos, passes, pantos, panti, passe, panti, panta, pasan, pan. Notice those are the same. Pantes, passai, panta, pantone, pasone, pantone, passin, passas, passin, pantas, passas, panta. All right, so a good little review there. The next verses, we're going to see these 5 verbs, so let's talk about them first. Namiso means to practice, or I practice, I consider, I think, I hold by custom, I deem, I suppose, I consider. So namiso. And then we have erkamai. You've heard that one before. Erkamai means I come or I go. And then over here we have balo, means I cast or I throw. And then arneomai, we've already seen this one. It happens again, so I just want to put it here. Arneomai, middle only verb, just like erkamai. And then we have dikazo. Dikazo means I separate, I divide, I alienate. So we'll see how Jesus uses that in this verse. All right, let's go ahead and read this. And I'll highlight. This is Matthew chapter 10, verses 34 through 36. Me nami sete hati elthon balein eirenein epitein gain uk elthon balein eirenein Allah ma kaidan elthon gar dixasai anthropon kata tu patros autu kai thugatera kata tes matras autes kai numphein kata ten pentheras autes kai ekthroi tu anthropu hoi oikiakoi autu. All right, let's look at these verbs again. First we have namizo. All right, that is here. Do not think. So Jesus doesn't want us to think that he came to bring peace on the earth. Wait a second. What do you mean by that? Well, of course he came to bring peace on the earth. But in this context, he wants to talk about he's bringing a sword that will divide people. Because we're going to confess him and other people will look at us and say, you're crazy, including our closest relatives. All right, so he came to bring peace eventually. But in the meantime, we are going to see a lot of division because of our confession of Jesus as our Lord. So then erkamai, where's erkamai, you might wonder? Well, here's erkamai in the aorist tense. This is one of our second aorist verbs that has some strange forms in its aorist tense. I came, eilthon. Now you should be getting pretty used to seeing eilthon, ace eilthon, ex eilthon. This is their aorist. So eilth is the stem, and then the on is our first person singular form. It's also our third person plural form, but we'll talk about that in the future. And then we also have eilthon another time. Eilthon, I came, for I came to divide. To divide. And that's, of course, before Jesus sets everything right. All right, and then we have balo, to cast, to bring peace. Well, in this case, it's not just bringing peace. Jesus is going to come eventually to just cast peace on the entire earth. I just think of it as waters will cover the earth. But in this time, the peace didn't come, right? There's not peace in the world quite yet. There is more division in the world. So Jesus will come later to cast peace on the earth. And then dikazo, to divide. So here we have an aorist infinitive. So with aorist, you generally will see the sigma. So especially because you started with a zeta, right? We have this zeta here. And when you add a sigma to a zeta, it just becomes one sigma. The zeta goes away. All right, so to cause, I have come to cause division. Okay, let's look at our prepositions, adverbs, articles, conjunctions, and pronouns. And we do have adverbs in these 3 verses. We have do not think. So this is one of our prohibitory subjunctives where you can use this in place of the imperative. So if you want to say something negative, like don't do this, you can use your subjunctive form. Now the subjunctive form here, instead of the epsilon, you have this long lengthened vowel. That's usually an indication of the subjunctive. So here we have me, no mi sete. So don't you think that I came to bring peace on the earth. Here, that, hati, on the earth, epitain gain. We saw that before, falling to the earth, the sparrows. And then tain, of course, is our article for the earth, is accusative feminine singular. And then another adverb, uk, comes before indicative mood. Here we have aorist, indicative, active, eilthon. And then but. So sometimes you'll see but as de, but if you really want to emphasize that it's opposed to the previous clause, then you often will see a la for emphasis. So I didn't bring peace, but a sword. See that contrast there? And then for, I came to divide. I came to divide. Now, Jesus didn't want us to be divided, of course, but there are going to be some people who follow him and others who don't want to, and that is a huge divide. All right, so a man against, remember kata, in this case, it's against, so we're having two. And like a ladder would be against a wall, that would be more of an accusative sense, like leaning against. But here, it's between the man and the father, and that's more of a genitive sense, so against his father. And then a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and enemies of the man against his household. So basically, the household is becoming enemies of the man who either accepts Jesus or doesn't accept Jesus, whatever is the opposite of his household. All right. This is our next verse. I put up some verbs here on the sides, and just so we can look at them as we're going through this. Now, let me just explain here. We have bold, face, italicized words here. That simply means that in the very earliest manuscripts of the New Testament, these verses are missing. So there's a question as to whether they were actually stated by Jesus or not. And they sound a lot like what Jesus would say, but they're here just to make sure you know that these aren't in the earliest manuscripts. They're in the early manuscripts, but not the very earliest. And I think they were added by someone who had been an eyewitness of Jesus, but it was added later and a later date. So that's why the very earliest manuscripts didn't have it. But we can't necessarily assume that Jesus didn't say it. But anyway, take it for what it's worth. So here we have phileo. Phileo means I love. I love. And there's actually several forms of I love. Phileo is more of a friendship. Like even friends would kiss, like Judas kissed Jesus. Not necessarily a friend, of course, in that case, but to regard someone with affection is phileo, as opposed to agapao, which is more of a romantic love. All right, and then we have eimi, which is I am or I exist. Lambano means I take or I receive, I get, I lay hold of. And then akalutheo, contract verb. I should point out the contract verbs like phileo. Agapao is also a contract verb with ao, alpha contract verb. Here we have two epsilon contract verbs, akalutheo, and this is I follow, I accompany, I attend. And then heurisco, notice rough breathing mark, heurisco means I find, or I learn, I discover, especially after searching for something. And then apalumi means I destroy, I utterly destroy, apalumi. And this is called a me verb. We're not going to talk about me verbs for quite a while, but that's kind of a class of Greek verbs that's fairly irregular. So, and they're not too common, so it might not be worth learning them right away. Once we see a lot of them over time, I'll talk about them more. All right, so Matthew 10, verses 37 through 39. Ha philon patera metera huper eme Uk estin mu axios, kai ha philon huion thugatera huper eme. Uk estin mu axios, kai has u lambane ton stauron autu, kai akaluthe apiso mu, uk estin mu axios. Ha huron ten psukein autu, apalese autain. Kai ha apalesas ten psukein autu, heniken emu, hurese autain. All right, so prepositions, articles, conjunctions, and pronouns, and adverbs. I forgot to change my title there. Here we have the one using the article. So this is actually more of a personal pronoun usage. So the one is just ha, the one. Who loves, who is loving, that's a present participle with own. So now that's the nominative masculine and singular form. Patera, a is a conjunction that means or. So just there's he, which is our nominative feminine singular article, but a without the rough breathing mark, with a smooth breathing mark instead, is or. So whoever is loving his father or mother above me is not worthy of me. And then here we have eme, so hupereme. Instead of just me, it probably sounds better to have the hupereme, hupereme. Uk estin mu axios. So here estin is our third person singular form of a me. So that person is not worthy of me, of me. So, and the one loving son or daughter above me, and notice above, huper, is an accusative, and that's kind of directional, right? You love someone above the other person. It's kind of a figurative way of saying that that person you put above Jesus. Uk estin mu axios, kai has, in this case, it's has instead of ha. Has u lambane ton stauron. So here we have indicative form, present active, so we use u instead of me. Same with here, indicative uk before smooth breathing mark. Must whoever does not take up his cross, ton stauron autu. Now stauros means cross. It also means stake, and that's what they called the cross back in those days when people were crucified. They were crucified on the stake. Ton stauron autu, whoever does not take up his cross. So this is the thing that causes him to struggle, the thing that really causes him to forget self and sacrifice for others. Kai, and follows after me. Here's a new one, apiso. I'm not sure if we've heard this one before in Matthew. I think maybe once, but apiso mu. This one, after me, this is followed by genitive. So akaluthe is present indicative active, and notice it's akalutheo. All we do is add our third person singular ending, a, akaluthe. Apiso mu, uk estin mu axios. And the one, ha, huron, ten sukein autu, the one having found his life, ten sukein autu. Now here, huron is the second aorist of heurisco, the verb that we talked about before, is meaning I find. So interestingly, we have this own ending, just like we have up here with philon, but this is a present participle. Here we have an aorist participle. And the funny thing is when you have a second aorist, like heurisco becomes heur, like Huron, Lake Huron, that stem, heur, will take the present endings. So it's very confusing. It has the present endings, but it's actually aorist because it has the second aorist stem. So that's why they put this having found. It describes that somebody has already found his life, will lose it. So basically on earth, if you find your life, quote unquote, find your life, that's with earthly things, then you're going to lose your true life. And the one having lost, here again we have an aorist participle, apalesas. So here, apalumi becomes apale, and then we have sas for our aorist ending, nominative masculine singular. So the one having lost his life, On account of me. Heniken emu. Heniken. For Jesus. On Jesus' account. Heniken emu. And again, it could just be mu, but after this nu here with a consonant, it probably sounds better. Hurese. Heurisco becomes hure, and then se for our future. This sigma is, it changes a little bit. You don't have the sk. So this is a little bit of a strange formation because we have heurisco with a sigma kappa, and we'll find it. All right, so whoever finds has a great life on earth will lose it, meaning it will lose it in eternity because he doesn't trust in Jesus. But the one that loses his life on earth, basically by submitting to Jesus' will and giving up the things of this earth in order to sacrifice for others and carry his cross, will find it. We have a few verbs here that we're going to see in the final verses. We have dekomai, which means I take, I receive, I accept, I welcome. And in these verses, it's going to mean I welcome, or also to receive, because you receive someone at your house, you receive them as friends. Apostello is to send away. Stello is to send. Apa is away, so apostello, I send away, I send forth, I dismiss. Lambano, this is also to receive. It could also mean to take. So it really depends on the context. So here, I receive, I get, I take, I lay hold of. Patizo. Patizo is I give to drink. Basically, when you have a guest, you give them a drink, right? If somebody's thirsty, you give them a drink. Patizo, I give to drink. And then Lego, we've seen before. I say, I speak, I mean, I mention, I tell, I call, I name. All right, let's go ahead and read our final verses. Again, these are not in the very earliest manuscripts, but I believe Jesus said them because I think everything in the Bible is not an error. All right, Matthew 10, verses 40 through 42, the reward of service. Ha dekamenas humas eme deketai. Kai ha eme dekamenas deketai tan apostellantame. Ha dekamenas prophetein eis anima prophetu misthan prophetu lempsetai. Kai ha dekamenas dikaion eis anima dikaiu misthan dikaiu lempsetai. Kai has an potise hena ton mikron tuton poterion psukru manon eis anima mathetu amen lego humin u me apalese tan misthan autu. All right, so I put down here misthas, misthu, ha is the reward or the wages or the hire. So in this case, misthan is reward. All right, so let's look at these verbs again. We have dekomai. So that's for the people that receive Jesus. So, or whoever receives you receives me. So basically welcomes you into their home, welcomes you to talk to them about me, receives me. And receiving me receives the one that sent me. All right, so dekomai. Dekomai. Apostello. All right, so the one that's having sent Jesus. The one having sent Jesus is the one who sent me. So basically the Father, God the Father. And then we have lambano. We don't recognize it probably because it's in this strange form, will receive. So lambano becomes lempsetai, lempsetai in the future, will receive. It actually becomes a middle form. You kind of receive to yourself, I guess. It's kind of reflexive, middle, but it's kind of like lambano becomes lempsetai in the future. And the stem changes quite a bit. The sigma joins with a beta to become psi, lempsetai, will receive. And then this, in the case here, is receiving an award. So that's a little different than receiving a guest or welcoming a guest. Will receive the reward of a prophet, right? And then lempsetai downhill, will receive the reward of a righteous man. All right, so all you have to do is receive a righteous man in the name of the righteous man, and you yourself will receive the righteous man's reward. And then potizo, to give drink, is here potise. This is subjunctive, aorist subjunctive, so we have, instead of the potizo, we have a sigma that joins here with the zeta to become just a sigma by itself, and then a lengthened vowel. Instead of in the present you'd have an epsilon iota, here we have this long eta. All right, so that's our subjunctive, whoever shall give drink to. And that's why we call this subjunctive, because it's not certain, it's just whoever in the future. So usually after Hassan, you'll have the subjunctive. Whoever may give a drink to one of these little ones of mine. And a cup of cold is basically like a cup, a cup of tea, but a cup of cold water. All you had to say is of cold, and it was understood, a cup of cold water. All right, and then the last verb is lego, and that's just a really common expression. Amen, truly, lego humin, I say to you. Previously, prophets would say, God tells me to tell you, but Jesus always says, I tell you. So another evidence that he is speaking as God himself. All right, let's take a last look at all of our interesting little words, our articles, and so forth. We have the one receiving you, and then humas. This here is also a personal pronoun, just like in our last verses, but the one who is receiving you receives me. So he almost puts me first to emphasize. Receiving you, me receives. So it's basically not just you that they're receiving me. All right, so those people who welcome Christians are welcoming Christ into their house. And the one receiving me receives the one who sent me. All right, so the one is accusative here, ton, because it's the object of receives, and me here is accusative, right? And then we have in the name of a prophet. So eis anima prophetu. So eis followed by the accusative. And the one, ha, dekamenos, receiving a righteous man, in the name of a righteous man, eis anima dikaiou, will receive the reward of a righteous man. And whoever, here has on, whoever shall give to drink a cup of cold water to even just one of these little ones. Now this is a little debated whether this monon is even one cup or even one of these little ones. So monon here is just one or only one. You can recognize this because we have mono in English is often used with the idea of just one, like monogamy. All right, eis anima mathetu, in the name of a disciple. And there's also some debate as to whether these little ones, even one of these little ones who are my disciple, or if you give one of these little ones a cup of cold water in the name of a disciple. So that's it differs between like the King James Version and your New International Version. Truly I say to you, ou may. Now these two adverbs together, ou may, is like emphatic negation. Not ever. No, not ever will he lose his reward. So this is extremely encouraging that, giving a cup of water to somebody who is a follower of Jesus in need is something that will earn you a reward. All right, of course, it doesn't give you salvation. You have to believe in Jesus for salvation, but there are some rewards that Jesus will be giving in heaven. All right, that's the end of lesson 24. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your sticking with these lessons all the way through to this point. Keep up the good work, and I hope they are blessing you. Goodbye.